Who is he? The first Verny artist Nikolay Gavrilovich Hludov. What is the secret of his immortal talent? More than a century has passed, but the memory of him does not fade into obscurity. On the contrary, his paintings continue to be the source of admiration and incomprehension. In the history of Kazakh art, Hludov will always be one of the first artists who stood at the cradle of national art. Since 1921, Hludov headed the first art studio in Alma-Ata. He was a good teacher and mentored many artists, who went on to become famous in their own right. Some of his pupils were Alex Bortnikov, Nikolai Solovyov, Semyon Chuikov, and the first Kazakh professional artist Abelkhan Kosteyev. The role of Nikolay Gavrilovich Hludov in the art of Kazakhstan is hard to overestimate. It is impossible to imagine the development of art in the country without his paintings, and it is equally impossible to imagine the life of the great artist without this country, which had long since become his love and inspiration. At some point in the early 19th century, a great number of expeditions were commissioned by the Russian Empire, all aimed at studying the steppe. Many artists participated in these expeditions. One of them was Hludov. He ended up staying in Kazakhstan for good. Year 1877, Fort Verny. The town of Verny had a disturbing kind of fame at that time. It was known as a land in the middle of nowhere and the epicenter of earthquakes of great destructive force. Figuratively speaking, a city on the top of a volcano. Young artist Nikolay Hludov traveled from Odessa right into the wilderness. This is how writer Dombrovsky was describing Verny in the late 19th century. Clay fences with neat little mud huts of quite unearthly colors. They were blue and green all because they added vitriol into their lime. All this was drowning in large gardens, which were also extraordinarily beautiful. There were gardens everywhere. The greenery in the city stretched out like an endless terrace. The first tier was white acacias. Over the acacias stood the orchards, and over the orchards poplar trees. Higher still were the mountains and the mountain forests. The whole city consisted of orchards, apple orchards, apricot orchards, cherry orchards, almond orchards, adorned by flowers of all colors, pink, white and cream.
Hludov, выходец из бедной семьи мелкого младшего артиллерийского чина.
Hludov came from a poor family of a low artillery rank. During those years, serfdom was abolished and peasants were left without land. Russian peasants believed in the existence of a fairy tale land called the White Waters, which was supposed to have been populated by very happy people. Figuratively speaking, it was the land overflowing with milky rivers, fertile soil and abundant pastures. This piece of paradise land enchanted the artist for the rest of his life. Nikolay Hludov taught art in an all-boy gymnasium in Verny, went on to become a state councillor and never thought of returning to his homeland. It is like I found myself in a dream world. Really, is this the promised land? It must be. After all, where I come from, there have never been such amazing mountains, such fragrant and multicolored meadows, such fast-flowing rivers, carrying their crystal water into the miracle of a valley. There have never been people as kind as the dwellers of this beautiful Seven Rivers fairyland.
То, что он остался в Казахстане, то, что он жил в Алмате.
The fact that he remained in Kazakhstan and lived in Alma-Ata, opened art studios and taught others is the evidence of the fact that he was deeply in love with this land, this nation, and regarded our life and culture with keen interest. And he channeled this love into art in the most passionate and truthful manner. It goes without saying that he was a wonderful man. He loved this nature, although it was foreign to him. Even though he had intended to stay in Kazakhstan for a little while, he became and remained devoted to this land for the rest of his life. Since 1879, Nikolay Gavrilovich Hludov worked as a draftsman at the surveying department of the Semirechye Regional Board and observed the life of the new people, making a lot of sketches. In 1886, he was invited as an artist on an expedition of geologist Ignatiev to study Mount Hantengri. His drawings were attached to the report of the expedition, which was sent to the library of the Geographic Society in St. Petersburg. Then he took part in an expedition of Professor Mushketov, whose task was to look into the earthquake that had occurred in Verny in 1887. The Council of the Russian Geographic Society awarded Hludov with a silver medal for his participation in both expeditions. A significant portion of the artist's ethnographic drawings remained in Verny. More than a century later, Hludov's unique album collection full of drawings, sketches and watercolor paintings has been preserved. At the moment, the 11 albums that accompanied the artist on his travels are being stored in the vaults of the Kosteyev State Museum of Art in Almaty.
На основании таких небольших набросков из таких вот студий складывались его большие.
His paintings evolved from these small sketches. The value of these albums is that he depicted what was happening around him very thoroughly. But when the time came to transfer the composition onto the canvas, he always felt like embellishing things. These albums are not the only evidence of the time gone by, but also the evidence of his skill as an artist. With just a few strokes of his pencil, he could outline different shapes, build a composition, and create such interesting images. When he painted in color, he laid his images out like a palette.
Такие вот интересные моменты, когда он просто пробует цвета акварельные, да, раскладывает их как на палитре.
Nikolay Gavrilovich Hludov is the author of more than 200 paintings, but during his lifetime he was considered a mere draftsman. Art historians of different generations still cannot decide what kind of artist Hludov was, an artistic individual or a mediocre executor. More than half a century ago, famous writer Yuri Osipovich Dombrovsky wrote that people did not recognize or even suspect him of being an artist. And to this day, no art history monograph has been written about him. Writer Yuri Dombrovsky wrote in his essays on Hludov: Fate gifted this eccentric man with enviable fertility. 100 of his paintings and sketches are still being preserved in the vaults of the Central Museum. But the picture gallery has refused to take them. What kind of an artist was he? Asked the critics. He has no style, no color and no mood. This man was just wandering around the steppe and sketching in his album whatever caught his eye at any given moment in time. In the town of Verny there lived an artist. In his youth he was strict and pedantic, only to become eccentric and funny as he grew older. He treated his guests to juju cigarettes in the mid-1930s. He very much wanted to get a government contract, but he could not understand why on earth he would want to enter into a contract with the state.
Будучи, когда он продолжал свое художественное образование в Петербурге,
as he continued his art education in St. Petersburg, he took lessons from a famous teacher and artist, Nikolay Gogolinsky. This man is a well-known figure in the history of Russian art, first and foremost for being a close friend of Pyotr Semyonov-Tenshansky. This individual had a lot to do with our homeland. He was a close friend of the Rerich family. He gave art lessons to Semyonov Tenshansky's daughter in the early 70s.
Знаком с семьей Рерихов. Вот. Достаточно сказать, что уроки у этого художника где-то в период 70-х годов брала дочь Семенова Теншанского.
The importance of Hludov's legacy as a teacher and educator lies in the fact that he brought Russian realism traditions into Kazakhstan's art, for our artists to apply in their work and pass on to their followers. I love Hludov for his freshness, his joyful demeanor, the fullness of his life, the beauty of the events witnessed and painted by him on the canvas. I love him for the sun, which shines brightly at me from all of his paintings. He made the meadow glisten with flowers, made the horses prance. The men in his paintings stand tall and proud, and the women have flowing manners of beautiful hair. He painted brocade, carpets, fabrics, and they were a joy to behold. Look, I can do anything. He was an excellent draftsman, not even a draftsman but a master of drawing. Sometimes he took to flirting with technique, showing that he could do anything. On an impulse and for no apparent reason he could engrave a heavy black-silver bracelet with an ancient Kazakh ornament or paint a piece of felt with such a breathtaking pattern that you could not help looking at it and touching it.
Он воспитал молодых художников, которые стали флагманами.
He taught a new generation of young artists who then became the heart of Kazakhstan's artistic world. In 1934, the year before his death, when he turned 79 years old and was already a very old man, his students Kosteyev and Hodjikov in particular were working as art restorers at the Central Museum. They ensured a solo exhibition for their mentor. It was the first exhibition Hludov had in his life. It featured about 120 of his major works.
Своему учителю. Это была первая выставка, которую сам художник увидел при жизни. Там было выставлено около 120 его крупных работ.
1 century later, the paintings of Nikolay Gavrilovich Hludov continue to delight and surprise art lovers. His characters are full of life, joy and happiness. Neither critics nor time itself could erase the talent and skills of the first Verni artist, whose faith and work were wholeheartedly devoted to Kazakhstan. This land that is filled with life has become my destiny, and I most fervently wish it every grace and kindness. Nikolay Hludov.